Ramiris, too, was being tossed about by this dizzying situation. To begin with, Ramiris had intended to stay peacefully within the labyrinth and pray for everyone's victory. This was because she believed her only capability lay in the management and administration of the labyrinth. In fact, Ramiris hadn't even known that she could move within the suspended world. She had occasionally thought things like, nobody's moving, but since it was a phenomenon that occurred from time to time, she simply accepted it as just the way things were. However, this time, the awakened Zijin arrived. Or rather, a deafening thought communication was broadcast, causing her to complain, "Hey, Zijin-chan. You're being incredibly loud, you know." It was through this interaction that she realized she could move, and so, accompanied by Zijin, she had come to this location. She had been worried about the labyrinth, but Zijin admonished her, saying, "Rest assured. Within stop time, nothing can be done. More importantly, there must be some way you can be of use." Convinced that he was right, Ramiris followed Zijin. Ramiris shuddered at the realization that Zijin was insane enough to use spatial transport within stop time. However, true terror would visit her immediately after. It seemed they had traced Rimuru's presence, but upon arriving at their destination, she was astonished. In more ways than one. First, seeing Veldanava about to hurl a sword at Rimuru, she reflexively shouted, "Just wait a minute." She had struck a cool pose, but the reaction wasn't particularly favorable. It was more along the lines of, "Why are you here?" Or, "Oh, so you could move in the suspended world too. There wasn't a single Ramiris, you're amazing," to be heard. Well, this was a shock. She satisfied herself with the thought, "Just watch my exploits from here on out and be amazed." Next, as she turned her eyes to Rimuru, the next shock arrived. "Rimuru, why are you alive?" That was it. Despite having no soul, he was acting completely composed. Moreover, he was utilizing healing arts of a different dimension to try and resurrect Benimaru, who was on the verge of death and seemingly beyond saving. Zijin was strange, but his master was even more absurd. But well, it is Rimuru, isn't it? Being able to convince herself with just that thought was proof of Ramiris's long association with him. After that, Ramiris endeavored to grasp the situation. Upon doing so, various things came into view. The most important was the presence of Veldanava. Wait. Seriously, just wait a minute. Ramiris was confused. She had been surprised by Rimuru, but she had heard nothing about Veldanava being resurrected. What is going on? She desperately wanted someone to explain the circumstances to her. However, now was not the time for such leisurely complaints. Even Ramiris could read the room that much. Thus, Ramiris observed Veldanava. Ramiris had gone through cycles of reincarnation several times, but her growth rate varied. There were times she became an adult in a few decades, and times where she remained a child even after hundreds of years. Her current child state had lasted a long time, but her memories had been inherited. Whether they were precious memories or mundane daily occurrences, the inheritance happened regardless of importance, and wasn't something Ramiris could control by will. Even with memories, some were no more than mere knowledge. Regarding Veldanava, she only remembered things in a detached way, as if they concerned someone else. It was a vague sense of his personality and presence. Warm, funny, a bundle of curiosity, occasionally scary, and yet lonely. Was he like this? The current Veldanava was vastly different from the figure in Ramiris's memories. For Ramiris, who could not perceive the color or shape of a soul, such differences could not be used as criteria for judgment. She had to judge solely on other aspects to see through to the truth. Precisely because it was Ramiris, she realized it. Every element pointed to him being Veldanava himself, yet something was missing. His appearance matched her memories. However, in terms of personality, he was vastly different. Just wait. Even if his wife Lucia-chan was killed and he holds a grudge against humans, isn't this too much of a change? Rather than being savage, he seemed to have given up on everything and detached himself. Veldanava's demeanor appeared disillusioned, like someone who had grown bored of a game they were once engrossed in. It seemed unmistakable that it was him, but Ramiris felt sad at his completely transformed state. You were more passionate, a guy who didn't know how to give up. Just like Rimuru is now. Well what? Ramiris looked back and forth between Rimuru and Veldanava. And she thought, they're similar. They were different in many ways, and completely different people, yet she felt a nostalgic presence coming from the current Rimuru. She sensed in Rimuru something that the current Veldanava had lost. Could it be that Rimuru is? It was mere speculation. However, Ramiris found herself captivated by that suspicion. It was troublesome, because once she started looking at him with that in mind, she couldn't see it any other way. Rimuru seemed to order Zijin to protect the unconscious Benimaru. Rimuru had been doing something quite reckless, yet Benimaru remained in critical condition. If only he would regain consciousness, something could be done, but time was currently stopped. Since he had passed out from severe injuries, the power to heal the fatal area of the magic core, which served as his heart, did not seem to be functioning. However, Ramiris felt she could do something about it. Even Luminous could not cast holy magic while time was stopped. But Ramiris could use magic regardless of the state. Of course, that was limited to small miracles. Exercising great power was impossible. If she truly wanted to save Benimaru. No, perhaps if I can borrow power from Rimuru. Benimaru's energy was stable, and it wouldn't be strange for him to wake up at any moment. On the contrary, compared to when he had sortied earlier, he appeared to have greatly increased in power. To speak plainly, it was at a level that could be called evolution. If only his magic core would start moving, there was a high probability he would wake up. It's my turn to shine, Ramiris thought. So, thinking she had nothing to lose, she made a proposal to Rimuru. The result was an immediate yes. Thanks to that, Ramiris was now revealing her adult form for the first time in 50 years. That fact also proved Rimuru's abnormality, but Ramiris didn't dwell on it. Well, if you think about it, it's only natural. After all, it's Rimuru. Being able to accept it just because it's Rimuru showed that Ramiris was quite happy-go-lucky herself. First, as promised, saving Benimaru was the priority. She would exercise primitive magic. It was a supreme power that caused miracles simply through wishing, effective even in a world where physical laws did not apply. With primitive magic, healing could be done at will. Benimaru's body was enveloped in Ramiris's healing light and rebooted. Thank goodness. Benimaru-chan's heart has started beating. Ramiris felt a wave of relief. Benimaru's magic core began to operate, adjusting the energy balance throughout his body. His condition was stable. Now, they only had to wait for him to wake up. With this, Ramiris had all but fulfilled her duty as promised to Rimuru. However, having gained some peace of mind, Ramiris pondered as she turned her eyes toward the battle between Rimuru and Veldanava. Is there truly any meaning to this fight? Ramiris harbored this doubt. If her conjecture was correct, wasn't it unnecessary for the two of them to fight? No answer came. Unfortunately, the correct answer would only be known after the conclusion. That's right. If it's Rimuru, surely. Ramiris believed that he would show her the right answer. Upon finishing Benimaru's treatment, Ramiris decided to quietly pray for Rimuru's victory. Every time our swords clashed, a shockwave ran through my arms. It wasn't unbearable, but there was a limit. If I didn't possess a means of recovery, both my arms would have been rendered useless in the blink of an eye. However, I am a slime. Since I can freely swap out the cells in my body, I could continue fighting while healing my fatigued cells. This method required no magic, so for me currently without Seal-san it was a truly reliable tactic. Even so, facing him made me realize it all over again. Veldanava was strong. He had absolutely no openings. It was a wonder I was able to keep exchanging blows with him at all. I felt a slight surge of confidence, realizing this was thanks to my never neglecting my training. Still, I felt something was lacking, and then I realized what it was. It was the height difference. Currently, I had the stature of an average high school girl, but Veldanava was naturally tall. He was at least over 180 centimeters, so compared to me at just under 160 centimeters, the length of our limbs was vastly different. Well, unlike judo or other martial arts, height difference isn't viewed as quite as critical in swordsmanship. Still, I felt I should even the playing field. Now that Seal-san, my lifeline, was gone, I had to challenge this mighty enemy alone. I needed to adjust the conditions to be as favorable to me as possible. Since I had the chance, I wanted a body that felt more like me. I decided to take on this final battle in a form even more familiar to me than Rimuru the Slime. Ever since Seal-san came to be, the idea had been constantly rejected, but I am actually capable of transforming into a male form. Long ago, back when Seal-san was still a great sage, I had transformed into Satoru, mimicking my pre-reincarnation self. I felt that form was more suitable for the current situation. So, I tried to see if I could transform. It succeeded surprisingly easily, and I transformed into a tall, short-haired nice guy. Perhaps it was because even if I couldn't use my authorities, the ability to transform is intrinsic to a slime. As the saying goes, it is easier to do something than worry about it. Trying it out turned out to be the right move. Veldanava looked at me with suspicion. So, I told him. Don't worry about it. I just figured this form would be easier to fight in. Preparations complete, I slashed at Veldanava. He blocked it effortlessly just as before, but it felt easier to fight than a moment ago. Even if it was just my imagination, it was the right choice for me. Can I really defeat this god? Even though my opponent was an existence that governed all authorities, my power was still working against him so far. Perhaps because of that, strangely enough, I felt no fear. On the contrary, my thinking was crystal clear. The anger at seeing Benimaru hurt, the rage against the absurdity of trying to destroy the world all, these various emotions mixed together, conversely making me calm. Once I fully accepted that he was the enemy, my perspective changed. I realized that simply defeating Veldanava, the mastermind, would solve every problem. If I thought of it that way, this was a golden opportunity. In short, I just had to win. Seal-san had guaranteed my strength, so trusting in those words and pushing forward was the right answer. Just as it had been until now, and just as it would be forever. Worrying could wait. After I defeat you, I'll ask you one last time. Are you willing to quietly change your mind? In battle, ending it is harder than starting it. That was why I always tried to be cautious, but such considerations were over now. That was why I declared that I would defeat him. In response, Veldanava let out a scornful laugh. For a mere automaton, you certainly talk big. Does that arrogance stem from your original personality? Wrong. Original personality or not, I am me. To begin with, in my case, I couldn't handle things like a separate body. If I were on the spot, restoring a personality was possible, but dexterous utilization like Valgrant's was impossible. In terms of copying a personality, it was simply beyond me. Technically, I should have been able to use the authority, so I suspect the problem lay with my consciousness. But conversely, the fact that I couldn't even copy my own ego served as proof that the me right here was the genuine article. It was a bit of a stretch, but since I was convinced, it wasn't a problem. Good grief. That's my line. I lightly parried the sword strike Veldanava had unleashed with casual ease. Interference waves of soul destruction surged through our crossed swords. However, they had no effect on me. I'm a soulless automaton, remember? As if an attack like that would work. This guy, despite running his mouth about it so much, he had actually started to doubt whether or not I really was a soulless automaton. There's no way I don't have one, you moron. It's a pseudo-imitation, but it's properly there. However, since it's a toy I created, it seems Veldanava couldn't track it down. Or rather, he appears even more confused, thinking there is no way such an object could serve as a substitute. Seeing that, I thought, lucky me. After all, right now, I don't have a soul. What that means is that I can't use the majority of my authorities. Well, that doesn't mean much to me. Seal-san isn't here anyway, so even if I could use them, I probably wouldn't have been able to master them. So, I wasn't worrying about that anymore.